Thank you, Adeline, for passing the mic to me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Alwi. I'm going to explain about learning objective and learning outcomes. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that all of you have seen this before, learning objective and outcomes, right? Okay, where did you find this? Yes, mostly in the textbook or any reference textbook. Okay, so did you read it or you just ignore it? Oh, it's okay, no offense. Okay, so these two terms often accompany one another. But what do they mean and how do they differ? So in this topic, we have several subtopics that we will cover, which the definition of learning objective and outcomes, the difference between learning objective and outcomes, and then the criteria of learning objective and outcomes. And the last one we will compare and discuss the learning outcomes and learning objective in the textbook and the SKP. Okay, are you ready? Let's focus on it. Learning objective and learning outcome, the definitions. Okay, what is the learning objective? Yes, learning objective describe what students should know or be able to do at the end of the course that they could not do before. So a learning objective should be specific, measurable, and clearly define the expected outcome of a course in terms of demonstrable skills or knowledge. Learning objectives are usually viewed from the instructor's perspective. Okay, what does the instructor want to accomplish? Okay, and then now let's turn to the definition of learning outcomes. Learning outcomes are the description of what the learner is expected to be able to achieve at the end of the program, module, or course. So learning outcomes are guiding tools which guide the students to the desired results of the planned course. Learning outcomes are seen more from the learner's perspective. Okay, what will the course teach me as a learner? So it will help learner clearly understand beforehand what they are going to learn from the course or program. Okay, so we have known the definition of the learning objective and learning outcomes. Now we need to know the difference between it. So it is important to differentiate between these terms because the two are closely related and they are sometimes used interchangeably, which can cause confusion. Okay, now let's take a look. For learning objective, describe the intended purpose and expected result of teaching activities, while learning outcomes describe significant and essential learning that learners have achieved. Okay, for learning objective, describe what the teacher hopes that the learning activity will accomplish, while learning outcomes describe what has been accomplished for the learner as a result of their participation in the activity. Okay, for specification of unit of knowledge, the learning objective describe discrete concepts, skill, or units of knowledge. For example, after taking this class, new hires will list 2 companies' policies. Okay, for learning outcomes, it describes wider range of behavior, knowledge, and skills. For example, by the end of this course, new hires are able to identify situation in which company policies apply. Okay, now let's move to the criteria of learning objective and learning outcomes. Okay, we have two clear frameworks for developing learning objective and learning outcome, which are ABCS and SMART. Okay, for ABCS, component stands for A for audience, B for behavior, C for condition, S for standard. While on the other hand, we have SMART, which is S for specific, M for measurable, A for action-oriented, R for relevant, and T for time-bound. Okay, to analyze our objective and outcomes, we only use one of it. We don't use two frameworks to analyze the learning objective or outcomes. Okay, we often use the components as a checklist to help ensure that our objective and outcomes have considered good or not. Okay, for my explanation today, I will choose SMART components as a checklist. Okay, what is actually SMART components? Okay, we'll already know what the alphabet stands for, right? So now we will understand what it actually is. Okay, for specific, the learning objective should be precisely states what the learner will be able to do. For For example, three types, processes of, and two factors. Okay, the next one is measurable, which is the describe the achievement of learning objective can be measured by text item for observation or problem solving or exercises. Okay, and next action oriented, which the learning objective should use an active verb that represents a behavior change or acquisition. For example, describe, explain, list, state, and so on. And R for relevant, describe it reflect realistic expectation of knowledge, attitude, or behavior acquisition or change given the conditions for instruction. And T, the last one, time bound. So the learning objective or outcome should specify a time frame which it will be completed. For example, following this session. Okay. Uh, this is some of the example of action verb from Bloom taxonomy. Okay, from this Bloom taxonomy, we can see the action verb used can indicate the level of difficulty. Okay, you can see from lower order thinking to higher order thinking: recall, examine, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. So these are the action verb under the recall, examine, apply, analyze, under the different level of difficulty. Okay, so but in writing learning outcome, we should avoid using verb that represent uh, action or concept that are very difficult to indicate or to measure, such as appreciate, understand, to know. Okay. Okay, now let's take a look to the example of poor and good learning objective by using smart components. Okay, students will be able to compare transverse and longitudinal wave and give example of each. Okay, we need to know why this sentence are poor learning objective. Okay, we need to check this using smart components. Okay, is it specific or not? Okay, we need to know the action verb used. It have compare and give, so the action verb is it have action oriented. Okay, is it specific enough? No, because it have two action verb used in one sentence, so it is not specific. Okay, is it measurable? Yes, it is measurable because we can compare transverse and longitudinal wave. Okay, we can achieve the comparison between transverse and longitudinal wave. Okay, how about the relevant? Is it relevant for student to be able to compare? Okay, we need to check the time bound. It doesn't have time bound, so it is not relevant for student to be able to compare. By what? It is not relevant. Okay, now let's take a look to the good learning objective. Okay, by attending the lecture, student will be able to compare transverse and longitudinal wave. Okay, so is it specific or not? Okay, we need to check the action verb use. It has compare, so it action oriented. So is it specific? Yes, it is specific enough. Compare transverse and longitudinal wave. Is this measurable? Yes, it is measurable because we can measure the comparison between transverse and longitudinal wave. Okay, so is there any time bound? Yes, by attending the lecture. So this is the time bound for this learning objective. Okay, so when you have a time bound, so it means it is relevant. So it's relevant for student to be able to compare the transverse and longitudinal wave by attending the lecture. Let's take a look to the last subtopic, which is textbooks and the SKP comparison and discussion. Learning objective. This is the flow of the discussion. First, we need to compare learning objective in the SKP and textbook. And then we need to analyze the learning objective using smart component. And the third, propose new learning objective using smart components. Let's take a look. Okay. From KSS Physics textbook, page 2, chapter 1, force and motion 2, it only provides QR code. When we scan the QR code, it will bring us to the SKP learning standard, or in other words, learning objective. Okay, all right. So let's analyze one of the learning standard in chapter 1, force and motion, which is communicate. Okay, Pupils are able to communicate about resultant force F when an object is stationary, F equal to 0 Newton, moving with constant velocity, F equal to 0 Newton, moving with constant acceleration, F not equal to 0 Newton. So it is specific or not? We need to check the action verb use. It have action verb use, which is communicate. So it action oriented. So it is specific. Yes, it is specific because the student are clearly state what they need to do to communicate. And then is it measurable? Yes, it's measurable because we can measure how to communicate about resultant force F when an object is stationary and constant velocity. And then is it relevant? Check the time bound. It doesn't have time bound in this learning objective. So it doesn't so it is not relevant for pupils are able to communicate because it doesn't provide time bound. All right. Now let's propose new learning objective using smart components. So by attending this class, pupils are able to communicate about resultant force F when an object is stationary. F equal to 0 Newton, moving with constant velocity, F equal to 0 Newton, and moving with constant acceleration, F not equal to 0 Newton. So it is specific. Let's check the action verb use. It have communicate, so it is action oriented. So it is specific because the student are clearly stated what they are need to do, and it is measurable because we can measure the communication about resultant force F when an object is stationary and constant velocity. So is it relevant? Check the time bound. It have a time bound, which is by attending this class. So it is relevant for students or pupils to communicate by attending this class. So it is relevant. All right. So let's take a look to the next example. Okay, this is the KSSM Physics textbook, page 135, chapter 4, electromagnetism. They also provide the QR code that when we scan the QR code, they will bring us to the DSKP learning standard or learning objective. Okay, let's analyze the learning objective in the DSKP for chapter 4. Okay, we take one learning objective. Okay, let's analyze. Pupils are able to explain factors that affect the magnitude of force on a current carrying conductor in a magnetic field. So, is it specific or not? Let's check the action verb use. So, it use explain, which is it is action oriented. So, it is specific. Are you sure it is specific or not? It is not specific because even when they use the action verb, but it doesn't state how many factors that student need to explain. So it is not specific. Is it measurable? Yes, it can be measured to explain the factors that affect the magnitude of force. We can measure it. So it is relevant. Check the time bound. It doesn't have time bound. So it is not relevant. It is not relevant for pupils are able to explain this factor but without the time bound. Okay, so let's propose new learning objective using smart component. Okay, by attending the lecture, pupils are able to explain two factors that affect the magnitude of force on a current carrying conductor in a magnetic field. So it is specific. Check the action oriented, action verb use. It have explained. So it is it have action verb. So it is specific. So is it measurable or not? Yes, it can be measured, which we can measure how to explain two factors that affect the magnitude of force. And is it relevant? Check the time bound. Yes, it have time bound, which is by attending the lecture. Okay, so it is relevant for students or pupils to explain two factors by attending the lecture. All right. Now for learning outcomes. So this is the flow of the discussion. They are the same flow for this is the same as learning objective, but we compare to KSSM and KBSM textbook, not the SKP. Okay. For the first, okay, for learning outcome in KSSM physics textbook, it for chapter 3 electricity, they doesn't provide any learning outcome in this topic or chapter, but it provide a concept chain, which is the mind map only. Okay, how about the KBSM textbook? Okay, KBSM textbook, it provide learning outcomes, and it also provide the conceptual map, which is mind map at page 70, chapter 2 electricity. Okay, so let's analyze the learning outcomes using smart components in KBSM textbook. Okay. Okay, by the end of this subtopic, you will be able to state the relationship between electron flow and electric current. Okay, is it specific or not? Let's check the action-oriented. So the action-oriented is state, so it have action-oriented. So is it specific? Is it clearly stated what you will be able to do? Yes, to state the relationship between electron flow and electric current. So is it measurable? Yes, it is measurable. We can measure the relationship between electron flow and electric current. Is it relevant? Let's check the time bound. It have a time bound, which is by the end of the subtopic. So it is relevant for you to be able to state the relationship between electron flow and electric current by the end of this subtopic. All right. So these learning outcomes are good learning outcomes. All right. Okay. So we don't need to propose the new learning outcome. Okay. Let's compare to the chapter 4 electromagnetism for KSSM physics textbook in page 168. They in this chapter they also don't provide the learning outcomes, but they only provide the mind map, which is concept chain, at page 168. How about KBSM textbook? Yes, KBSM textbook, they provide the learning outcomes for chapter 3 electromagnetism at page 75. Okay, and they also provide the conceptual map, which is mind map, at page 108. All right, so let's analyze the learning outcomes using smart components. Okay. By the end of this subtopic, you will be able to plan and conduct experiments to study factors that affect the strength of the magnetic field of an electromagnet. Okay, is it specific or not? Let's check the action verb use. Plan and conduct. So it have action oriented. So it is action oriented, and so it is specific? No, because it have two action verb use, which is plan and conduct. So it is not specific. So it is measurable? Of course, it is measurable because we can plan or conduct experiment to study factors that affect the strength of the magnetic field. Okay, is this relevant? Check the time bound. Is there any time bound? Yes, by the end of this subtopic. So it is relevant for you to be able to plan and conduct experiment by the end of this subtopic. All right. So let's propose new learning outcomes using smart components. Okay, what do you think? By the end of this subtopic, you'll be able to plan experiments to study factors that affect the strength of the magnetic field of an electromagnet. Sorry. Okay. Okay. It is specific or not? Check the action verb. Yes. It have action verb which is plan. Is it specific? Is it clear stated what you will able to do? Yes, to plan experiments to study factors that affect the strength of magnetic field. So it is measurable? Yes, we can measure this. And then is it relevant? Check the time bound. Yes, it have time bound, which is by the end of this subtopic. So it is relevant for you to be able to plan experiment by the end of this subtopic. All right. Okay. We have see the mind map used for both a textbook, which is KBSM and KSSM. Okay, what actually is the benefit of mind map? Okay, first, mind map can boost your productivity which it can save your hours to study. You don't need to read all the content in the textbook when you are studying. So maybe you can use the mind map and choose which content or which terms that you are lack of. So it can save our time, right? Okay. So when you have time, what usually you are doing? Anything. We can do anything. Maybe we can study to other subject. Maybe we can do household chores. Maybe we can play sport. Maybe we can play games. Okay, so this is what is meant by improve your productivity. Okay, now the second benefit, which is it helps with memorization and retention. Okay, mind map helps in memorize and recall information. Essentially, they will develop a mental visual for the things they need to remember, allowing them to recall large amount of information. All right. So the next benefit, which is it's more engaging for form of learning, which is mind map create meaningful engagement because learners actively engage in the process of brainstorming, generating ideas, and connecting concepts together while reviewing and developing mind maps. All right. So the last benefit, which is improve understanding of complex issues. So this is the biggest benefit of mind map, which is it helps to improve understanding uh, of complex issues. So because it distills information and reach clarity faster. When we have a complex issue, we can connect the issue until the roots of the information in my map. So it will help in understanding the content of it. All right. Opinion. So this is my opinion towards learning objective and learning outcomes. So in my opinion, for learning objective in the SKP still need to be improved because some of it are not fulfill the requirement of smart component. Some of it still not specific, some of it still not measurable, some of it still not relevant, and still don't have any time bound. Okay, so still need to be improved. Okay, and then in the textbook, maybe someone wonder why the learning objective in KSSM textbook are in a QR code. Okay, how students should read, right? Okay, as I mentioned before, the learning objective are more viewed by the teacher. Hence, this will help them to plan a lesson or prepare a good material for their student. Okay, and then for learning outcomes, as I mentioned before in KSSM physics textbook, the learning outcomes are not included in the textbook, right? We don't see any learning outcomes in the textbook. Okay, so for my opinion, the learning outcomes should be included, whether it is short course or a short topic or a degree program. Okay, the learning outcome should be listed and written down before the start of the course to know and to check whether the course is designed and conducted perfectly or not. Nevertheless, this will help students learn more efficiently. Okay, okay, so that's all from me. Thank you. Sorry for my grammatical error during my presentation. Now I will pass to the next presenter, which Aisyah Kisamuddin, to continue the next part. But before that, let's discuss in the WhatsApp group.